What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Hallen, and I am back with another true crime video. Now, we are heading into the new year, and if you guys haven't noticed, I've been working really hard to post a lot more content lately, and I have so much more to come. That's a huge goal of mine next year, which also means that I need to put a lot of focus on my work-life balance. It's a whole lot to dive into these cases, to figure out how to decompress afterward and still take care of my family. And that's exactly why I've used HelloFresh for the past 5 or so years now. Every single time I'm asked how I disconnect from work, I get asked this in interviews, and when I'm face-to-face with you guys, cooking is literally always my answer. It's a way for me to wind down, spend time with my kids, and obviously the outcome is definitely a huge plus too. There's just something so therapeutic to putting on music and getting creative in the kitchen. HelloFresh delivers delicious meals straight to your door weekly, allowing you to reclaim your time with loved ones instead of wandering around grocery aisles for hours, which is like my least favorite thing to do. Each box is packed with fresh, pre-measured ingredients that help fight food waste and makes it really easy to whip up meals for you and your family in as little as 30 minutes. Whether you're just cooking for yourself or if you have an entire gaggle of children to feed like I do, there's so many amazing meals to choose from weekly to fit every single one of your dietary needs. There are great vegetarian options, there's family friendly, low carb, dairy free, and some of the meals are customizable so you can swap, add, or upgrade ingredients as you wish. And since life can be wild and unpredictable, I speak from experience, you can easily pause or cancel your subscription as needed. Having all of the fresh ingredients ready to go for me makes it so easy for me to just shut my laptop at the end of each day and immediately jump into Zen mode. Each meal comes with a recipe card that has easy to follow step-by-step instructions, so not only can I easily cook a meal, but my kids are able to help out as well, which is really awesome. I was personally never taught to cook growing up, so my poor husband basically ate bricks for the first half of our marriage, poor guy. But when I started to order HelloFresh, I learned so many skills. It really helped to boost my confidence in the kitchen and allowed me to get creative. And now I'm basically running a Michelin star restaurant out of my house. I know it's impressive. I will let you know when I open up reservations. Now, just the other night after work, I made spicy Peruvian chicken. It was the first time I'd actually made this specific meal with loaded rice and creamy salsa verde. My husband refuses to eat a meal without rice, and this rice was so flavorful. It paired perfectly with salsa verde. The quick pickled jalapenos are also possibly my all-time favorite food. They were so spicy, but still had a bit of crunch to them, adding a great texture element to the meal. And everyone gave this meal a huge thumbs up. And as a mom, that is literally the most you could ever ask for. They may or may not have eaten half my bowl in the process. So this upcoming year, I encourage you all to spend time in the kitchen with HelloFresh. You can click the link in my description or scan this QR code in the code HelloDanielle to get 16 free meals. You guys, that's massive. This code can be used worldwide to give you a special discount depending on where you are watching from, so you all get to enjoy. Thank you again to HelloFresh, and now let's get into the details of today's case. Today, we are speaking about the highly suspicious disappearance of 27-year-old Courtney Holden. She's one of the many missing and murdered Indigenous women whose cases have gone cold and remain unsolved. If you're interested in hearing more about this particular problem, I have an entire playlist filled with MMIW cases with lots of facts, lots of information to help you understand better. Now, Courtney was reported as missing in 2019, so this is not necessarily an incredibly old case. But authorities were quickly able to find that she hadn't just gone missing. It had actually been about a year and a half since anyone last saw her. And the details, or really lack thereof, around her disappearance were nothing short of contradictory and questionable. So let's go ahead and get right into the details. Unfortunately, Courtney's history is not well known. There were not a lot of people that were able to come forward and give a lot of that information, and you'll understand why when we get further into the video. I have no idea what tribe she is a part of, what her youngest years were like, only that she was placed into the foster care system at a very young age. So not only is this an MMIW case, but another case where it seems that the foster system has just totally failed another child. Courtney bounced around homes until finally landing on the home of Judy Holden in Spokane, Washington. And from what I have seen, Judy has 3 children of her own, 2 daughters that lived states away, and her son Josh, who consistently lived in the family home as these foster children were passing through, including Courtney. Courtney lived majority of her life with the Holdens, and she was eventually adopted by them. I think she was the only one that ended up being adopted. Her home was even her last known place of residence when it's believed that she went missing. Now, while I don't know what those years of her life really looked like, the things that she liked to do, the hobbies that she had, I do know that around the age of 20, Courtney was living in the home by herself with Judy. Josh moved away for a while, and she ended up meeting a young man named Michael, and they gave birth to a baby boy. Now, they didn't end up remaining together, nor did Michael end up with full legal custody of their little boy. That was all in Courtney's hands. They still came together to create a parenting plan to ensure that their son was able to spend time with both parents. So at the time of her disappearance, Courtney was living at her home in Spokane, Washington with her adoptive mother, her 7-year-old little boy, and then Josh, her adoptive brother, had moved back into the home years prior. And ultimately, it would not be Josh or Judy that would report Courtney as missing. It was Michael, the father of her son, and his new girlfriend, Autumn, that raised the alarm on Courtney's disappearance. October 5th, 2019. Autumn, again, the girlfriend of Courtney's son's father, I know it's a lot, called the non-emergency line in Spokane, Washington. And Autumn just briefly explained to them that she hadn't seen or been able to get in contact with Courtney Holden in around a year and a half at this point. She was worried that something had happened to her and wanted authorities to go and perform a welfare check. Now, it doesn't seem that anything was done right away. This is kind of someone calling to report it from like an arm's length, and so I don't think it was necessarily taken seriously. So the following day of October the 6th, Michael himself decided to call the non-emergency line back to explain further why they were so concerned. Michael began to tell authorities that he last knew Courtney to be living at the home with the Holdens, and he explained that Courtney had full custody of their son, but they had put a parenting plan in place years prior. And Courtney had always been really respectful of it. She was a great mom. She wanted Michael to be in their son's life, and they had been actively co-parenting with each other. But unfortunately, Michael had not seen Courtney or his son in the last 2 years. He explained that he was having a really rough battle with substance abuse, and once he finally got a handle on it, he had another wrench thrown in. There was a pretty serious emergency that he was dealing with within his family. And so once everything calmed down and he felt like it was finally a positive and good environment for his son, he attempted to reach out to act on this parenting plan. When he and Autumn both tried to do this, they hit a brick wall. Courtney didn't have social media, nor did she have a phone. She didn't have a car, which we will get deeper into in a bit. So I'm not exactly sure how they were attempting to reach out to her. Maybe they were going to the Holden's home knowing that she lived there, trying to see her, trying to see their son, and were given the runaround. Or maybe they just tried to call Josh or Judy. But regardless, she seemed to be entirely unreachable. Nobody was able to tell him where Courtney or his son was. So they were obviously worried because not only is Courtney considered missing in their minds, but they didn't know where the son was as well. So on October 8th, 2 days later, authorities went to the Holden's home to perform a welfare check. And right off the bat, there were some massive red flags. The Holdens were pretty uncooperative from the start. They refused to speak to the police unless it was outside of their home, and they really didn't even want to talk at all. They explained that Courtney had just been at the house days prior, but she had since decided to go off with her son and her boyfriend in the days since then. Now, they couldn't really say where Courtney had gone with her son and this boyfriend, and they couldn't even say what the boyfriend's name was. So they essentially were like, yeah, she basically up and left, said nothing to us, gave us no details, but we're pretty sure she's totally okay. So police felt something seemed a little off and decided to ask for Judy's phone number so that they would be able to reach back out if needed. And Judy did reluctantly agree to this, but when she went inside to write her phone number down for police, she shut the door and deadbolted it behind her to do so. And at this point, when authorities left, they decided to immediately file both Courtney and her son as missing, because while Josh and Judy were claiming that she was completely fine, there's still a minor involved. So they had to be able to put eyes on him and confirm to his father that he's safe before they can move on. But in a very strange turn of events, almost immediately after filing Courtney and her son as missing, a phone call comes into the crime line, which is basically a non-emergency tip line. The dispatcher answered it, and the person on the other end of the line was a woman, and she was claiming to be Courtney Holden. Authorities listened in as she explained that she was completely safe, her son was safe, and that nobody needed to be looking for her. And while that would absolutely be the best possible outcome at this point, it's what everyone would hope, something about this call also just didn't seem right. Authorities had a really bad feeling about Courtney's disappearance. So the case was handed over to Detective Randy Lesser from the Major Crimes Unit, and right away, they began to reach out to everyone they could, try and get a more accurate date that she had last been seen, and see if maybe Courtney had told someone else where she was going with her son. But it only brought forward a horrifying reality. Detectives managed to get a hold of Courtney's biological brother, Ruben, and his girlfriend, and both of them corroborated what Autumn said in regards to the last time they had seen Courtney. It had been at least a year and a half. And according to them, Judy and Josh had given them the same reasoning when they asked where Courtney had gone. They had been told that Courtney decided to run off with a boyfriend, but there was one major difference in what they told Courtney's brother and what they told the police. According to Courtney's brother, Courtney did not take her son with her, and he knew this because he and his girlfriend had been to the Holden home numerous times since the last time they saw Courtney. They had been going to the Holden's house to visit Courtney's son, who was living with the Holdens under their care, but the visits were nothing short of bizarre. Apparently, Ruben's girlfriend's name was also Courtney, so when she would go to the Holden home, Josh told her that she had to go by an alias. She was not allowed to use her name because he feared that it was going to upset Courtney's son to hear it, which potentially could be something that makes sense. But even stranger, Courtney's son was calling Judy mom and Josh daddy. And the Holdens were calling Courtney's son by an entirely different name than his legal one. So as you can see, the math is not mathin', and nothing anyone is saying is adding up. Clearly, whoever spoke to the Holdens were told a bunch of different things. What the Holdens were telling police was completely different than what they told other people. It was super suspicious. The Holdens had just told them that Courtney had only recently left the home. They made it seem like she left days prior. But we've got two completely different sets of people saying, no, we definitely haven't seen her in over a year, and one of those groups of people had been to the home multiple times. And on top of that, they had lied about Courtney's son. They said Courtney's son went with her when clearly he had not. On October 10th, authorities were back at the Holdens' home, and this time they wanted to take a look inside. They were met with irritation and pushback right away. Clearly, Judy and Josh still did not want to cooperate, and Josh even told authorities that he knew Courtney had called them to say that she was fine, so he didn't understand why they were still looking for her, which, you know, up goes a pretty big red flag. But eventually, Judy seemed to crack a little bit. She finally agreed to let the detectives into her home and to see Courtney's room. But the entire time, she was wigging out. According to authorities, Judy did not want them wandering around the home, and any time that they would try to slip into another room or they would get out of eyeshot, there was one instance where one of them ended up behind a closed door away from Judy. She freaked out. So they were wondering what on earth she was so worried about them finding. And Courtney's room didn't really comfort them either. The room was cluttered and a total mess, which matched the rest of the house, but the bed itself had no sheets on it, there were no pillows, nothing. It was completely bare. And from what they could gather, it didn't seem that anyone, including Courtney, had been staying in this room for quite some time. So this whole idea that Courtney had just left days prior, again, was not adding up. And she also had clearly not taken a lot of belongings with her. And considering the fact multiple people hadn't seen her in a year and a half, that just really didn't make any sense. And since they had been told that the Holdens had Courtney's son by Courtney's brother, they attempted to go and take a look in his room. They were like, we want to see if he's in there. We want to see what the status is of that room. Does it look like he's been in there? But this was where Judy drew a line. She freaked out again and quickly kicked the police out of the house. There was something going on here, and authorities intended on figuring out what. So over the next few weeks, they started to speak to everyone they possibly could. They were trying to gather some sort of timeline and see if maybe there was someone else who had seen her more recently. But everyone that they spoke to, from Courtney's family to the Holden's own family members to neighbors, all painted a really scary picture. They couldn't find a single person outside of the Holdens themselves, Judy and Josh, that claimed to have seen Courtney for the past 18 months. And everyone who had asked them where she went got different stories. So it turned out that the life Courtney was leading within the Holden home was a nightmare. According to neighbors, the happenings in the Holden home had been worrisome for years at this point, and Josh seemed to be the center of all of these concerns. Neighbors and even his own family members described him to police as violent, unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. He had a huge temper and lacked all ability to control it. And people believed that it was so bad that his own mother, Judy, was afraid of him. And his criminal record backed all of these claims and fears. Josh had a history that was pretty lengthy and included things like domestic violence, burglary, unlawful imprisonment, which I find interesting, and sexual assault. He had actual charges pressed against him for sexual assault back in 2005, where he had allegedly told his victim he wasn't done with her yet as she was trying to escape. But ultimately, those charges were dropped because the victim was so scared she stopped cooperating. He also had been the main focus of a sexual assault back in 2003, but never ended up with any charges in regards to that. Regardless, neighbors explained that they felt something horrible was happening in the home, just out of their eyesight, but they never could figure out what exactly or really get any solid proof of this. Josh had moved out of the home for a little while, which is when Courtney finally had freedom. Again, something you'll understand better in a little while. This is when she was able to meet Michael and when she ended up falling pregnant with her son. But just years later, after she gave birth to her little boy, Josh moved back into the home, and this is, according to neighbors, allegedly when things started to change and turn much worse. According to neighbors, Josh moved back in and immediately put surveillance cameras all around the home. And at this point, they started to see Courtney and her son less and less. And when they did see Courtney, it was never good. She was typically out in the backyard doing some sort of chore, and the few times that someone would be able to talk to her over the fence, she was usually covered in bruises and claimed that Josh, quote, beat on her. But these conversations never lasted long because Josh would allegedly come outside screaming at Courtney and her son to come back in. After Courtney was caught a handful of times speaking to people over the fence, her and her son were only ever outside at night when less and less people were out to talk to them. One neighbor stated, quote, "It wasn't a happy place there. I would see Courtney come out in the evening. She'd be out in the yard doing chores. They weren't allowed out in the daytime." Another neighbor said, quote, "Courtney's son would come out in the evening to play. Josh would be yelling at the top of his lungs to get back inside. Something wasn't right. You just knew." Courtney had also managed to become close to one neighbor that she would safely be able to call in the middle of the night, likely because everyone else was sleeping. Because again, Courtney had no cell phone, she didn't have a car, she had no way to communicate with literally anyone. So she was basically trapped in this home, according to witnesses. And when she would get the opportunity to get her hands on a cell phone and call the neighbor, Courtney would call crying, saying that she was so unhappy, she wanted to get out of there. And she explained that she always had to ask permission from Josh to leave the house, but that normally it didn't go over well, and she was too scared to sneak out because of all the cameras that he put up around the home. He would find out, and that clearly scared her. She was a prisoner in that house. So many people saw these things, but no one ever thought to report them, which is an entirely different conversation that I will speak on later. It's just always gut-wrenching to see someone go missing or, for someone to be found murdered, and there's just all these people that have this information. Ultimately, none of the information was acted on. I have no idea at this point what her family's experience was coming to the home to visit her. I don't know if they only started doing this to see her son after she allegedly ran off with a boyfriend, or if they had always come over and been close with her. But what they did have to say is that they also felt something was off when they were there. It turned out, according to multiple witnesses, that Josh and Judy also didn't even call Courtney by her name either. They had adopted her as a young girl. She had been living with them into her adult years, and they instead called her Cindy. short for Cinderella, which matched the way that they treated her because all anyone ever saw her doing at that house was chores. Some witnesses explained that they were worried to intervene and say something because Courtney didn't always seem outwardly upset or worried. She was also an adult, so there seems to be this false impression by a lot of people that she had every opportunity to leave, but that is just not always the case. And now so many people have come forward saying that they wish that they had done more. But it seems that when things really went downhill was around the time that Michael stopped coming around. When Michael was coming around to see his son on a regular basis, obviously not only is that someone keeping tabs on the little boy, but someone that has to maintain communication with Courtney. And so when that communication stopped and there was no one really to notice that Courtney wasn't leaving the house or, to witness what was going on inside or to demand access to their son, Courtney basically never left the house. They rarely saw her at this point, and that's saying a lot because they rarely saw her before. And she had allegedly resorted to Facebook to try and talk to people, but her very last message she ever sent was warning the person that Josh was coming, and after that, she never got on Facebook again. And this all led to a terrifying encounter between Courtney and the Holdens in August of 2018 that was witnessed by a neighbor. This neighbor claimed that Courtney came storming from the house one August day, dragging a duffel bag behind her. And Judy raced after her, screaming at her to get back inside. Courtney ended up telling Judy that she was not going to be staying there anymore. She clearly had had enough, and she attempted to continue to flee. But Josh, who is 6 feet tall and over 300 pounds, ran after her. He picked her up, he carried her back behind closed doors, and Courtney was never seen again. And when all of these witnesses had eventually asked about Courtney, where she was, what was going on, they were all told different things. Some were told that Courtney ran off with a boyfriend. Some were told she ran off with a fiance. Sometimes the Holden claimed that the boyfriend that she ran off with was a long-distance truck driver, so Courtney would be gone for quite some time. And other times, the Holdens just straight up claimed that Courtney hadn't gone anywhere. She was safe and sound at home, and they just hadn't seen her. Sometimes she wasn't able to come to the door. She's sleeping. All of these different things that she had told people to get them to believe everything was fine with Courtney and not question things further. One neighbor even came forward claiming that after this last sighting, after Courtney was seen being dragged back into the house forcibly by Josh Holden, that they witnessed Josh digging in the backyard of the Holden home in the middle of the night, just days or something later. Now, it was stated that he was putting up a playset, but neighbors have expressed concerns trying to figure out why he would have been doing that in the middle of the night. Now, multiple witnesses from family members to neighbors claimed that after Courtney was last seen during that last encounter, she was gone, but her son was seen at the home with the Holdens from this point forward. So this seemed to be where police settled in regards to when exactly Courtney disappeared. And they were able to somewhat confirm this through her medical records. Courtney had a prescription that she typically refilled monthly, and the last time that she refilled it was July 2018. She had been on it for quite some time. She had been consistent with refilling it, but after that, there was nothing. She never refilled her prescription ever again. As if things weren't already unsettling and highly suspicious, one witness came forward to give a first-hand account of the horrors they experienced within the Holden home, because this person was a foster child that had been taken in by the Holdens and had lived there with Courtney through absolute hell. This man named Jensen came forward saying that he had lived with the Holdens, quote, from the moment I had my first memory until I turned 12. And he said that the entire time he was living there, he was in complete and total fear. He and his brother had both been placed in the home, and he claimed that they witnessed and personally experienced constant abuse at the hands of Josh, saying that they were treated as Josh's personal human punching bags. He said that it was so awful to experience the abuse, but to see these new kids come in that have already gone through so much and are already struggling through this foster care system, and watching what would end up happening to them was so much worse than experiencing it himself. Jensen said, quote, it kind of became a survival thing just to get through the day. Now, eventually, Jensen's brother had enough. He was tired of the way that Josh was treating him, and so he fought back and ultimately stabbed a member of the Holden family. Now, I'm not entirely sure who exactly that was, but clearly he just lost it. And when this happened, it ended up getting the attention of Jensen and his brother brother's biological sisters, who were like, this is not acceptable, and did the absolute most to get them out of the home and to safety, something that Jensen has said that he's forever grateful for. He claimed that once he and his brother were gone, Courtney told him that Josh had instead turned all of his attention to her. Jensen said he doesn't believe that Courtney is alive and never for a minute believed that she ran off, leaving her son behind, because anyone that lived in that home would never leave someone that they love in the care of Judy and Josh. He went on further to say, quote, I think at first they took foster children in for a monetary thing. They needed money and more income, but then it turned into abuse. And according to those that were close with the family, they also allegedly stated that Josh very evidently had some weird connection and obsession with Courtney's young son, which I think is shown by the fact that he had Courtney's son call him daddy and had just decided to rename her son on his own. To add to this absolutely chaotic collection of information, Holden's family allegedly came forward, according to authorities, saying that Josh and Judy had both bragged about how easy it would be to hide from police, and Josh specifically said that he thought it would be incredibly easy to kill someone and hide the body. Authorities were shocked at what they had learned and strongly felt at this point that the Holdens were hiding something. And one of those things was Courtney's son, which is a big freaking problem. Because at this point, numerous people had seen him there the past year and a half with the Holdens. And the last time that he had been spotted with them was actually on the 10th of October. So the day that the police came to the home, went inside to look in Courtney's room, and had asked to look into her son's room, neighbors said that they saw him leave the house with Josh and Judy just after all of that happened, which is super interesting considering they had refused to let authorities go in the little boy's room, and Judy seemed absolutely paranoid of anyone getting out of her sight and ended up kicking them out. And when detectives started to dig into other aspects of Courtney's life to try and figure out a better timeline, they caught Judy and Josh red-handed. Despite the fact that Courtney had not been seen since August of 2018, her bank account had been active with regular withdrawals, including a $600 withdrawal on the day that she was reported as missing. So authorities decided to look up surveillance to see who took it out, because maybe Courtney really was out there. I mean, they did receive this strange phone call, but instead they saw Judy and Josh taking the money out of her account. Courtney also had food stamps for her and her son, and those had also been used the entire time she was missing, including the day she was reported missing. And when authorities looked that up, they got even more confirmation. The surveillance showed Judy and Josh using them for groceries, and guess who they had with them? Courtney's son. So on October 24th, they got a warrant to search the Holden home and showed up prepared for anything. They were hoping to be able to get Courtney's son, put him into the hands of his father, figure out where on earth Courtney was, but instead they showed up and found that Josh, Judy, Courtney's son, and their 6 animals had all fled the house. The house wasn't by any means totally empty, like they didn't pack everything up and move. They had just taken necessities, it seems, and ran. But there was one thing in particular that had been taken that was quite strange. The entire surveillance system was gone, including the DVR that held the entire history of recorded footage. Authorities still continued their search throughout the home to try to find anything at all that might lead them to where Courtney may be, where Judy and Josh left with her son. And they didn't seem to find anything, at least as far as I know, that was helpful with that. But they did find a handful of alarming things. First and foremost, they found Courtney's ID card as well as her personal journal. And I'm hoping that this journal gave them some sort of insight as to, what she was going through, but obviously those things have not been released. And they also found 18 cell phones in the house, which is just wild to me because why? And they found a handful of computers. And then they found handwritten notes about blackmailing people. And the only people who feel the need to blackmail others are people who are keeping secrets. Cadaver dogs were brought in, likely because a witness had seen some digging going on, but ultimately the dog didn't make any hits at all. But at this point, things were not looking good, and an investigator came forward announcing, quote, "I'm extremely concerned about Courtney Holden's well-being, and I found no concrete evidence that she is currently alive." So going through the list of possibilities, it's obviously not seeming very likely that what the Holdens are saying is true, because they're literally the only ones saying it, and everything they are saying can be completely discredited by multiple other witnesses, surveillance footage, the whole 9 yards. But just to play devil's advocate, let's say that she did decide to run off with someone. Courtney didn't have a cell phone, she didn't have a car, she wasn't even, according to neighbors, allowed to speak to them over the fence. While she had found access to a phone at some point and a computer, we know that all of these things were ultimately taken away and she wasn't able to use them anymore. That would have been the only way that Courtney would have had to communicate with anyone, because she didn't leave the house. So if she was planning to run off with someone, I feel like police would have found evidence of that within all of those electronics. But I don't think they did, because they have clearly stated that they believe foul play was involved. And I also find it very hard to believe that Courtney would ever leave her son in their care. So at this point, authorities started to try and locate Judy and Josh, because they, from what they understood, had Courtney's son illegally, and they need to answer some questions. And they were able to find that both of them had ditched their phones and their numbers, their old numbers that were with Washington, and had instead obtained new phone numbers and phones with Texas area codes. But this didn't seem to get them close to any answers until about a month later. In late November of 2019, neighbors called into police saying, hey, there's someone over at the Holdens house. So they obviously packed up and rushed over there, hoping that it would be Judy and Josh or someone that could tell them where they were. And it turned out to be Judy's son-in-law and daughter from Texas. Judy's son-in-law spoke to authorities and claimed that he personally hadn't seen Courtney in about 2 years, but he was told that she ran off with a boyfriend. And he ended up admitting that Josh, Judy, and Courtney's little boy had all randomly shown up at his home November 26th, so literally just days prior to this. He claimed that Judy had been taking a retirement road trip or something along those lines. That's why they ended up down in Texas, but he had absolutely no idea where they had been for the last month. And for some reason, once they showed up on his doorstep, Judy had her son-in-law and daughter fly up to Washington right away to check on her home. And then just a few minutes later, Judy's daughter walked up to talk to police, and she ended up saying something completely different. Judy's daughter told police that she also hadn't seen Courtney in a long time and had also been told that Courtney ran off with a boyfriend, but she claimed that Courtney had not just run off with a boyfriend, but also with her son, which completely contradicted what her own husband just told authorities happened days prior, that they all showed up with this little boy in tow. And when authorities tried to push further and get information about Judy and where they were, daughter claimed that she had no way to get in contact with her to speak to authorities. And considering the fact that 18 some cell phones were pulled out of their old home, I think it's safe to say there's probably numerous ways that they could have gotten in contact with Judy. It became evident very quickly that Judy or Josh were getting her daughters to say and do whatever she needed them to, because they sent them up to go and check on the house in Washington. And authorities had also managed to get in contact with her other daughter, and this daughter ended up admitting that that phone call that came into Crime Line the day Courtney was reported missing, of Courtney saying, hey, I'm fine, my son's fine, I'm safe, don't look for me, that was Judy's daughter pretending to be Courtney. But when they asked her, why on earth would you call and impersonate a missing person saying that you're fine, especially as someone who is not even living at the house, who apparently has no information on this person's disappearance, but she refused to give any reasoning as to why she did this. Now, Judy and Josh were finally located on December 16th, and they definitely had Courtney's son with them. And so on December 19th, both of them were arrested. They were charged with identity theft and custodial interference. Courtney's son was taken into protective custody, thank God, and his father was able to drive down to get him. But at this point, there were no charges in regards to Courtney's disappearance. So both Judy and Josh were questioned extensively about what happened to Courtney and were called out for all these inconsistencies and lies, but they maintained their innocence and refused to speak, saying they had nothing to do with her disappearance and stuck to their story that she ran off with her boyfriend. And they both fought extradition back to Washington. They obtained an attorney who fought for their release, citing Judy's age. She was about 75 or so at the time, and Josh's health, he was about 40, and he apparently had like a brain tumor and other things going on. I don't know, I can't say for certain, but their attorney made the point to repeatedly state that the child was safe and sound and these were minor charges, so he wanted them released. And even when Washington was fighting for extradition, he said, no, why don't you just release them from federal holding and like I will make sure someone takes them up to Washington so we can clear this up. Basically saying this is one giant misunderstanding. And he ultimately said that Josh and Judy had only done what they thought was right, placing the blame on Courtney's shoulders, saying that she was a mom that decided to up and abandon her child for a man with the Holdens, and they just decided to take care of him. When it's people who are involved with the foster system and adoption process, they should have known very clearly that that was illegal what they were doing. But I digress. He went on further to say that he believed Courtney was alive and well, and he intended on locating her to help prove his client's case. And spoiler alert, here we are 4 years later, and he has failed to do that. As they were fighting to get a warrant to extradite Judy and Josh, authorities managed to find that entire month of November, where there was just this massive question mark, the Holdens' whereabouts were unknown and unaccounted for. It turned out that they had gone straight from Washington to an RV park in Oklahoma. And according to the RV park, they had checked in under fake names. I mean, if you were trying to look not suspicious, they did a really, really crappy job at that. They lied multiple times, fled the state, checked in an RV park under fake names, changed their, area codes and phone numbers and everything, and took the surveillance system. I don't know how you get any more suspicious than that. So authorities hoped that maybe this would help. They wanted to go search the trailer, the car that was used, but ultimately they still found no evidence linked to Courtney's disappearance. So I just have one big glaring question of, where did the surveillance system go? And the DVR that Josh and Judy literally took from the home. Out of all the things they could have taken, they took that. Where is it? And ultimately, both Josh and Judy did in fact end up being released from the federal hold due to the pandemic. So because they had lesser charges and it was running through detention centers, they were in that group of people that were released. And ultimately, in 2021, they both pleaded guilty. Josh pleaded guilty to his 2 charges and was sentenced to 135 days in jail with credit for time already served. And Judy also pleaded guilty to second-degree custodial interference, so the identity theft was taken off of hers. But I have not been able to find what her sentencing was, because literally after this, after all the information that I just gave you, even really before the final hearing, the media just stopped reporting. There's literally no more information on what happened. I can't find anything after 2021 other than a handful of articles of people who knew about her disappearance at the time and were attempting to get the story out there again, but there was no further information. So basically, Judy and Josh are out walking free. They served time for the crimes they were found guilty of, but the question still remains, where on earth is Courtney and what happened to her? Authorities at this point have said that this case has in fact gone cold, and they have made numerous pleas to the public since, asking for anyone who has information to come forward. I don't necessarily think this is a situation where there was a lack of effort from law enforcement. I think they were doing all that they could. They interviewed dozens and dozens of people. They searched the house. They had cadaver dogs. They went all the way to Texas. There was a lot done, but unfortunately, it just didn't bring forward the answers that they feel are there. They're hoping that by keeping this case in the spotlight, it will hopefully help them eventually solve it. It seems pretty obvious that numerous people are harboring information that they are not being forthcoming with, and I can only hope one of them grows a conscience and reaches out to authorities. Everyone that knew Courtney, including authorities, have stated that they believe she's no longer alive, and authorities have even specifically stated that they believe she was murdered. However, because they have no solid evidence of this and just a bunch of strange lies and circumstances, her case is still considered a missing persons case.
Nearly 2 years since anyone has seen Spokane mother Courtney Holden. Spokane police only learned of her case a few months ago. Now they're investigating her adoptive mother and brother, who were recently arrested nearly 2,000 miles away in Plano, Texas.
It just makes me think more that they hurt her and did something to her.
Now Holden's friends are overcome with guilt.
Hindsight's 2020 for Courtney Clay, who says she couldn't have predicted this 2 years ago. But knowing what she does now, she can't help but feel like she could have done more for her friend, Courtney Holden, who she believes is gone.
And we need to find her. Whether it's her or her body, we need it.
Courtney Holden's friends need answers too. But right now, they can't help but question themselves.
I feel like I could have done something for her. I wish I would have.
Courtney Clay is grappling with the possibility she might be without Holden on her wedding day when she marries Holden's brother, Reuben.
I could have asked her more questions. I could have dug deeper.
Specifically, she says she could have looked into Holden's adoptive mother and brother, Judy and Joshua, who have since been arrested in connection to her disappearance.
I think that the two of them have something to say, and they won't ever say it.
Court documents detail the abuse Holden endured here. Clay says she knew her friend's kindness was being taken advantage of, but that Holden didn't seem to mind, and she didn't let on how serious it was.
That's all she's been around, so she thought it was okay to be treated that way and that it was normal.
When Clay asked why Holden wasn't around the house, she was told she had run away, leaving her young son behind.
I had maybe put it in my head that maybe Courtney checked herself into a mental institution or something, and that she was getting some help. That's what I wanted to believe.
When that belief started to wear off, Clay didn't know where to start. She was scared to ask the important questions for fear of retaliation and what she'd find out.
I feel like Courtney is not here. I feel like there needs to be justice for her, and that something needs to come forward. Somebody needs to come forward.
The biggest hope that I have right now is in my previous video, my previous MMIW video, I spoke about a couple of law changes in Washington and different things that were happening. And I spoke specifically about the fact that they've put together a cold case unit that solely works on MMIW cases. And I can only hope that this ends up being one of the first cases that they dig into, because I feel like with new resources, more manpower behind this to keep pushing this case, this is definitely one that I believe is solvable. Courtney would be turning 32 years old this upcoming February, and her son is missing out on a life with her. If you have any information on this case at all, I have all of the contact information you need down below. I'm sure there are multiple ways to anonymously submit information, so if you are one of those people harboring information, please do the right thing and call and tell someone about it. Courtney was around 5'6" and weighed 170 pounds when she went missing. She has dark hair and dark eyes. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to hear Courtney's story. Please keep her family and her son in your thoughts, and hopefully we will have some sort of answers soon. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallen fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.